G'day guys, and welcome back to our Kart Class Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing how much does karting really cost. Now, we want to look at sort of areas that parents or drivers can potentially save on, areas that people waste their money on, and realistically what a race weekend might look like from a budget point of view. So let's get started. When you're looking to start in karting, first of all, we need to work out whether you can get a second-hand kart or a new kart. For a new kart package, obviously the benefits are it's the latest model kart. It's also brand new, so has a kart been straightened? What's the wear and tear like? Just generally, does anything need to be replaced? The bearings, the steering column, things like that could be just, old and rusty and might need a fair bit of money spent on over time. For a new kart package, we're looking at between, say, $6,000 to $7,500 for the latest whiz-bang stuff out of Italy or even the Arrow karts out of Australia. That's sort of a rough price. Got to put an engine on that now. So again, we're looking at, depending on what engine, whether it's a Cadet, probably around $4,000. For a 125cc engine, whether it's a Rotax, Iami, things like that, probably around the $5,500 mark. So there's a fair bit of difference. Second-hand package is going to be around that, 5 or 6,000 compared to, doubling potentially for a new kart. So you've got to sort of weigh up, are you in a competitive position? Are you looking to treat it as a hobby or something that you want to just get started for 6 to 12 months, see if you like it, see if you're competitive, and then look to get a new kart? That's where you got to sort of look at whether, just the state of where your racing wants to get to. Now, once we've got our kart package, so we've chosen either a second-hand or a new kart package, we want to sort of look at our racing equipment. So we need to get a helmet. Now, this is probably something I wouldn't skimp on too much. If we've gone and spent, $11,000 or $12,000 on a new kart package, we probably want to protect our head if we're going at speeds of 100 to 110 kilometers an hour. So you can get helmets from around that $250 mark, and they're going to range up to, probably around the $1,500 mark for an Arai or a Bell helmet. They're probably two of the most popular and in-demand helmet manufacturers. Then it comes to the race suits. This is something you might want to, you can probably budget on a little bit more. You can get suits for like $250, and you can get personalized suits that are upwards of $1,200. So that's something that if you've got sponsors that are willing to pitch in for, to have their brand on the suit, then look, go ahead and get a personalized suit. Looks good, highest quality, probably going to last the longest. But that's probably an area where you can save a little bit of cash on from a race suit point of view. Now we're looking at gloves and boots. Again, you don't probably need to go all in for race gear like that because you can get fireproof stuff, which is going to be on the higher end, maybe $250, $300 for a set of gloves and boots. It might be something you can sort of, again, save a little bit of money on is the racing gear like that. Most drivers look to get a rib protector when they're starting out. I think it's a good idea because your ribs there's not a lot of meat there to cover your ribs. And obviously the G-forces that people are experiencing around corners with the nuts and bolts that are sort of in that top echelon of your rib cage, it can get quite abrasive there and it can hurt your ribs quite quickly. So probably looking around that $300 mark for a good rib protector. You want something that's got sort of that carbon fiber reinforcement. The rubber ones don't do anything. So if you see a cheaper quality rib protector that's not carbon, it doesn't have that reinforcement, waste of time. Things that people often overlook when they get their new kart packages, they're going to need some spare parts. Now, if you go to the track, some shops are around the corner. So if you do have an issue or you get stuck or you crash, wherever it may be, you can go to your local shop. Other people, they might be an hour away from their circuit. So you need to have a few things on hand that commonly, might have if you break it, like if you have some damage, there are things you're going to break first. So let's look at some of these key areas for spare parts that you might want to have in your van or your trailer or your car. We want to look at some wet tyres and some wet rims. Now, it's just, from a racing point of view, if you go into a race, you need to have a spare set. You can't sort of chop and change between dry rims, dry rims, and then putting wet tyres on. It's all going to get a little bit too hard because obviously if the track is changing between wet and dry, you don't have time. So I would really recommend getting a set of wet rims that tend to be a little bit narrower in the rear, so the more traction, and then having a spare set of wet tyres. Now, these things are sort of going to be around that probably $250 mark for the wheels, and also for the same for the wet tyres. So we're looking for about $500 there for a spare set of wet rims and tyres. Some of the general spares that we want to basically have on hand for us are, you might want to have a spare axle. This is more so from from an accident. You can use it from a tuning point of view, but when you're starting out, probably want to just keep a very neutral setup so you can just worry about your driving rather than looking for potentially a tenth of a second gain from an axle. But if you do want to tune the cart, you can have a spare axle from a different grade to what's in your cart, or you can just have a spare of what's currently being used in your chassis. That's probably going to look at around $200 to $300 for a spare axle. Now, things that commonly get damaged when it comes to an accident are stub axles. So that's what's on the front of the chassis connecting your tyre to the tyre rods. They tend to bend in an accident. So they're designed to take a lot of the force so that your chassis is more protected, and same as your tyre rods as well. You'll find that commonly tyre rods and stub axles are things that it's a good idea to have spares of. So stub axles are ranging from $150 to $200 per stub. So you want a left and a right. And then tyre rods, again, I'm not 100% sure, but it's a wise idea to have probably one or two tyre rods on hand also. Spark plugs if you're starting out with younger drivers, because if they're not driving fast enough, their cart could fuel up a little bit too much and you could fail a spark plug. Probably have 2 or 3 on hand. They're around $15 to $20 for a spark plug, but always good to have on hand, especially on colder days when the engine doesn't get up to temperature as much. It doesn't quite burn the fuel as well. For some people, they're going to look to have a spare engine. Now, this is more once you start racing. So if you're willing to travel to race events, then it's probably a wise idea to have a spare engine, because you don't want to travel 2, 3, even more to get to a race event. And then after qualifying, after a heat race, you've got an engine issue. And if you don't have that community around you, or the engine builder's not there to have a spare on hand, then your race weekend could be over before it's even started. So again, you might look to have a secondhand practice engine, and that could be around that $2,000 mark for a spare. Now, it's also a good idea to have some chains and some sprockets on hand as well. Now, that could be from going to different circuits, so you want to change the rear sprocket size, and then depending how big or small you're changing the rear sprocket, the chain size will also need to be adjusted if you're changing, maybe 3 sprocket sizes or more. So again, just having 1 or 2 chains and sprockets on hand is also a good idea. And the thing we've been noticing is that chains and sprockets are wearing out much more frequently as well. So you might find if you're losing some engine performance, it could simply just be that the chain is stretched and it's worn out and it's not quite rotating at the same quality as what it previously was. So there's sort of some of the general spares that are always good to have on hand. Now, obviously you can have more things like kingpins. They tend to bend in the front end. You might have a spare set of wheels from either a testing point of view, or just simply that if you have some damage to a wheel or to a rim, you can also change that as well. Now we're looking at race weekends. What does a sort of race weekend cost? You're going to look at, if you're traveling, obviously there's accommodation. So, for a national level event, there's probably minimum 3 nights accommodation, because practice will be on the Friday, racing on Saturday and Sunday. So you're looking at sort of a Thursday night to Saturday night accommodation. Many people stay at the track, many people camp. So there's sort of ways that you can look to save a little bit on accommodation. You've got your entry fee. That's something that you can't get around if you want to enter the race, and you're sort of stuck with that. A race set of tyres, again, you're pretty much stuck, because at most race events, not so much club level, but definitely once you get into that regional, national level, you're going to be starting on a brand new set of racing tyres. That just gives you the best opportunity and the best performance as well. With that, you might look to have a spare set of, or a new set of racing wet tyres as well, so in case it rains throughout the weekend. But typically, if you've only used them for 1 or 2 sessions previously and it's not that bad, you might just look to use the same set of wet tyres that you've practiced on before. Now, in terms of a race team or getting a coach on hand, these are just like luxuries that not everyone needs, but if you do have the budget to put that in, then you might be looking at, say, between $500 and $1,000 for a racing weekend from a race team point of view. Things like that vary in price when it comes to marquee hire, how many days the event is, the travel for the race team and the coaching, transportation if you can't get there because of work commitments, or it's actually more beneficial for you to be at work and have someone else transport your car. Then again, that's going to be an added expense, but it might actually play into your favor to be at work or at school for more days. Now, where people seem to waste money is it's things like, having unnecessary amount of axles, same with wheels. So what they do is they tend to start with what they've got. It's going okay. Now they're starting to look in areas because they've heard someone's using, this axle, and the next weekend they're using a different axle. And all of a sudden they've got 6 or 7 different axles. Same as the wheels. You find that, the AMV brand has about 12 different brands of wheels in that combination. So again, people just start accumulating a lot of sets of wheels, a lot of sets of wet rims. These are sort of areas that if you're looking for 1 or 2 tenths, then possibly this is an area where you're going to improve on. If you're 1 or 2 seconds off, don't have all these axle brands and axle grades and all these different wheels and combinations, because realistically, they might improve you slightly, but not to the extent that you're going to need to spend thousands of dollars just to have sitting in your van or trailer for. The other thing is, when you're starting out, look for your transportation, whether it's a van, it's a trailer, it's a truck, whatever it may be. But people can get a bit exuberant with their trailers and their vans and so on. So it goes hand in hand with, do I spend money on a fancy trailer, but then I'm going to save on accommodation because I'm going to sleep in my trailer? Perfect. That's a great idea. If you can afford a fancy trailer, half your luck. Also a great idea. But if you're going to spend, $30,000 or $40,000 on a trailer, and then you're going to skimp out on a new set of tires when it comes to a major race, then maybe that's not really wise spending, because now we're going to start complaining about the results and things like that. Other things are, again, similar to the race suit point of view, you can get the fancy race suits, but also with the sticker kit. If you've got someone that's willing to, do up a custom sticker kit for you and add some of those sponsored logos, perfect. Get some fancy stickers. They look good. Otherwise, just stick with what you've got with what comes with the car. You're looking at around that $350 for a custom sticker kit. Otherwise, if you can get a little repair kit that just goes over the top of your stock standard chassis, then maybe just look to do that instead. I see people with all these fancy, stickers and clothes and, like I said, suits and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't necessarily make them a lot faster. They could be probably better spending their money on, coaching and things like that to get them up to speed quicker, rather than just going to the track to look good and still be, like I said, 2 to 3 seconds off the pace. So that's sort of a rough breakdown on how much karting costs. You are stuck from a kart and race gear point of view. From a general spares, just have a couple of things on hand, especially if you don't have a shop in close proximity to you, because there's nothing worse than driving an hour and a half to the track, doing 1 or 2 sessions and having something break down, and having the luxury of fixing the car. Things like toolbox, especially from an Australian point of view, SP Tools has a great karting toolbox. They've basically designed it around the tools that you use on a race weekend. They're like $350 and they're absolutely perfect. They're easy to transport. They're small enough. They open up quite easily, and they have just the essential stuff that you need. So I'd really recommend, if you're going to, get some tools, the SP Tools toolbox is really perfect for that. Tire pressure gauges. Again, you can get just an analog one, which is very simple, but that's okay when you're starting out. Then when you want to look to be more precise, I'd definitely recommend getting a digital gauge. They are in that, say, $300 to $500 mark, but I've had one for like 7 years. So I'd recommend, if you are serious about racing, just get one to start with. And if you're going to stay in the sport for a long time, then you've got it. You don't have to worry about it again. So again, that's something that you need on a race day. You can't just, guess what your pressure is going to be by just putting some air in at a compressor and just hoping that it's going to be right. So you need a tire pressure gauge. Hopefully that's given you and not scared you too much when it comes to what karting costs are. From a race weekend, some general spares, where not to waste some money, and just the essentials on rear protector, race gear, and new or used karts. So, if you've got any questions when it comes to getting started in karting, or where you may be potentially wasting money, then I'm happy to answer questions through my social network if I can help you out. So feel free to DM us or message us on our Kart Class social media pages, and I'll be more than willing to help out where I possibly can. I appreciate your time listening to the podcast, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll speak to you guys soon. Cheers.